Swirling, howling wind and piercing rain hovered over the ocean, quickly making its way toward the island nation of New Zealand. The devastation that would follow was something no one could predict, and would rival modern-day hurricanes in its ferocity. Welcome to Fast Facts Friday. My name is Eleanor. Just a quick disclaimer for our younger audience before we dive in. This story may be disturbing to some, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay everyone, let's get into it. This week we'll be covering our third natural disaster on this channel. To start off with, I'm going to define an extratropical cyclone so we are all on the same page. An extratropical cyclone is a large-scale, low-pressure storm system that occurs in the middle latitudes of the Earth. They are also called mid-latitude cyclones, wave cyclones, or baroclinic storms. Typically, they get their energy from the horizontal temperature contrast in the atmosphere and have a cold core. They have one or more fronts connected to them, including cold fronts, warm fronts, and occluded fronts. They can produce a range of weather conditions, from cloudiness and mild showers to severe gales, thunderstorms, blizzards, and tornadoes. Typically, extratropical cyclones can occur over both land or sea. Hurricanes, which most of us are more familiar with, are tropical cyclones, and extratropical cyclones differ in that they are typically winter storms, though both have low-pressure centers. Most recently, there have been two major hurricanes affecting the southern portion of the United States, Mexico, and numerous parts of the Caribbean. By clicking the donate button on this video, you can donate to those affected by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. I understand that money is tight for everyone right now, so please do not feel pressured. Any help for the victims of this disaster is welcome and appreciated. Looking at Cyclone Giselle, it was the worst storm recorded in New Zealand's history. New Zealand, for our younger audiences and those unaware, is about 1,000 miles off the southeastern coast of Australia in the Tasman Sea and Coral Sea. It is comprised mainly of two islands, aptly named the North and South Islands, as well as a number of small islands, some of them hundreds of miles from the main grouping. The massive extratropical cyclone Giselle would strike this island nation and cause massive amounts of devastation, including the loss of TEV Wahine, which we will dive into this Sunday. On April 5, 1968, the storm that would become Giselle began to build in the Coral Sea near the Solomon Islands. It was named Giselle by French meteorologists when it struck Nouméa, capital of French Caledonia. After 1953, storms were named after women, though the reasoning isn't entirely clear. However, the maritime tradition of referring to the ocean as a woman may have played a factor, and naming these storms made it easier to remember them by. Once they got female names, weathermen began talking about them as if they were women, sometimes derogatorily or in a sexist fashion. After 1979, male and female names began being used equally. Prior to 1953, storms were referred to in order in which they occurred in the year, which was confusing if multiple storms happened at once, much like we saw with Hurricane Helene hitting the shores while Milton was still brewing at sea. On April 6, 1968, storm warnings were issued throughout New Zealand, despite the fact the storm was 3,000 kilometers away. The storm started to deepen as an upper-level trough interacted with warm, moist subtropical air over the upper North Island, proving a volatile mix. It was a cyclone by April 8, 1968, and was a Category 1 at sea. Early in the morning on April 9th, Cyclone Giselle made landfall and hit Cape Reinga. Wind gusts of up to 160 kilometers per hour caused massive damage to houses and other buildings. With the wind came a torrential downpour, flooding farmlands of Northland and drowning hundreds of farm animals. A farmer was killed near Kaitaia when he was blown off of a haystack. Roofs can be damaged by wind speeds half that of Cyclone Giselle and can be torn off by speeds of 120 kilometers per hour, so the winds and flooding were devastating here. The cyclone's path moved southward, repeating the pattern of damage as it traveled across the North Island and down the east coast. Ships were driven ashore, landslides closed roads, and there was massive flooding. Wind gusts ripped roofs right off their trusses and blew in windows. Mud, water, and debris filled roadways and homes. By the time Giselle hit Wellington on the morning of April 10th, another storm arrived on scene. A storm had driven up the west coast of the South Island from Antarctica, and the two storms faced off over the capital city, causing huge amounts of damage and wrecking the inter-island ro-ro ferry TEV Wahine. And we'll get into that on Sunday. We don't want to spoil the surprise for you. If you are enjoying this episode and want to hear more about ships, their careers, and their wrecks, check out our main show Shipwreck Sunday every Sunday night at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, shipwreckers, it's time to look into the pinnacle of this storm. The winds in Wellington were the strongest ever recorded by the New Zealand Meteorological Service. At one point, they reached 275 kilometers per hour. A young girl was killed and her sister was injured when a piece of roofing iron crashed through their bedroom window. Shrapnel and debris are deadly in windstorms and can cause extensive damage and be incredibly lethal. Wind can also carry a person off their feet. During Hurricane Katrina, my elementary school principal volunteered to help with the rescue and recovery efforts and was there during the storm. He described being blown off his feet and being carried by the wind for 10 to 15 yards. Wind was deadly during Giselle as well, with an elderly man being blown over by the wind and dying on the way to the hospital. Other people were seriously injured in falls or by flying debris. In the Wellington suburb of Kingston, the roofs of 98 homes were ripped off by the severe winds, and 3 ambulances and a truck were blown onto their sides when they attempted to get into the area to help the injured. Flooding, wind, debris, and fear spread throughout Wellington, but the storm wouldn't stop here. As the storm moved onto the South Island, in Christchurch hundreds of houses lost their roofs and both the Avon and Heathcote rivers flooded. Throughout Canterbury, over 500 hectares of forest were completely destroyed, with trees ripped clean out of the ground. In Southland, the flooding was the worst seen since the December 22, 1913 storm that ripped through the South Island. Some people were stranded on the roofs of their homes and had to be rescued by jet boat. Cyclone Giselle finally blew out somewhere in the Southern Ocean. It was the worst storm recorded in New Zealand's history, and sank the Wahine. In total, including the 51 victims of the loss of Wahine, 54 people perished. When we look at the technical aspect, it lasted 7 days in New Zealand, from landfall on the 9th of April until it left New Zealand on the 15th of April. Insurance industry payouts totaled $3,500,000, and in 2024 that would be $31,711,308. The Northland received a staggering 26 inches of rain in less than 2 weeks, leading to the extensive flooding. The speeds of winds are debated, so please keep that in mind. While the storm was technically rated a Category 1 at some points, the wind speeds reported in my research indicate speeds similar to that of a Category 5 at times. Storms like this happen all around the world, and those affected by these storms are left behind to pick up the pieces, spending months if not years regaining what they've lost and potentially mourning lost loved ones. New Zealand has recovered from extratropical Cyclone Giselle. However, those affected by Hurricanes Helene and Milton are still deep in the devastation. My heart goes out to them. By clicking the donate button on this video, you can donate to the recovery efforts of Hurricanes Helene and Milton to help those impacted get back on their feet. Natural disasters can be absolutely devastating, and the scariest thing is that they are out of our locus of control, leaving us feeling helpless. Being at the whim of Mother Nature is something we all deal with living on this planet, and technology that helps to predict weather can aid in keeping people safe. Rest in peace to all of the victims of extratropical Cyclone Giselle, and I wish their loved ones nothing but the best. If you liked that story and wanted to hear something similar, check out our cruise ships, ferries, and ro-ro ferries playlist in the cards. Stay tuned this Sunday for the loss of TEV Wahine, which was sunk during extratropical Cyclone Giselle in April of 1968. Thank you for tuning into Fast Facts Friday. Have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you next time.